Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a big show for you. The Falcons have revamped their defense, probably fixing their biggest weakness. We'll talk about how big of a difference that will make for their season, getting not one, but two huge pieces for that defensive unit. Then we'll talk about history in the MLB as Aaron Judge hit his 300th home run last night, the quickest in MLB history for anyone to ever reach that milestone. We're going to take a quick detour into the world of soccer as well as the U.S. men's national team has officially hired a new head coach. We've talked a little bit about the whole situation with the old head coach before continuing our series today in our last two segments, talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, their offseason, and giving them a record prediction. So stick around for all of that. But before we get into the Falcons, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can hit that super chat button right next to the chat option. If you do either of those things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw that in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, today we are going to get into we're going to start off with the Atlanta Falcons. And when I say they revamped their defense, We're going to start off with the big news from yesterday, breaking just a couple of hours right after our show ended. Matthew Judon, star pass rusher from the New England Patriots, get traded to the Atlanta Falcons for a third-round pick. And we'll break down what this means for both sides first before we get to the second move that happened today. Matthew Judon is one of the best pass rushers in the league. Don't get that twisted. He isn't a huge name that gets talked about all the time in national media circuits, but when he is healthy, he has been consistently one of the best pass rushers in the league. Last year, he only played 4 games due to injury, and obviously we're going to throw that season out the window. But 2 years ago, he had 15 and a half sacks, good for 5th best in the league. 3 years ago, 12 and a half sacks, good for 8th best in the league. That is 28 sacks over 2 seasons, and when we're taking those 2 seasons combined together, that makes him the top 3, number 3 on the leaderboard for sacks over that 2-year span, only trailing Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa, 2 of those guys that we constantly talk about as being some of the best pass rushers in the league, and tied with TJ Watt. He's only 32. He was disgruntled with the Patriots, which is why this was a deal that happened. The Patriots would not have traded him if they thought he could be a part of the team in the future. They aren't going to sign him, so they trade him to the Falcons, and now it's the Falcons' responsibility to sign him. Now, that's where this gets a little bit more up in the air because the Falcons only have $3.5 million in cap space, and that number has definitely gone down since they signed their second player earlier today. So I'm not sure if they're going to get a deal done, which is reminiscent of the Hassan Reddick situation that we just finished talking about, I believe, earlier this week even. We went on a whole diatribe about how the Jets really messed that situation up. But maybe they get a contract done. This is a lot of win-now moves. And when you look at the Falcons roster now, they add Matthew Judon, which for a third-round pick is a steal. You know, Matthew Judon is absolutely worth a third-round pick. I just talked about how he's been a top 10 pass rusher when healthy every single year. He is a top 5 pass rusher in the league. Adding to a unit that, you may not believe this, but the Falcons have not had a top 10 pass rush unit since 2004. It's been 20 years since they had a top 10 pass rushing unit, and I don't expect that to change this year because outside of Matthew Judon, their big pass rushers are Grady Jarrett and rookie Rook Arojo, who not the biggest fan of him personally as a pass rushing threat, but this is a much improved unit. They'll be able to get pressure on quarterbacks, which is what they need. And, adding him and Justin Simmons, Pro Bowl safety formerly of the Denver Broncos, who is a really another really underrated guy. I think safeties overall are kind of an underrated position, but adding Justin Simmons, putting him opposite of Jesse Bates the third there, that is probably the best safety duo in the league right now. You get those two back there. They're both ball hawks. They both know how to play coverage. It is going to be it's going to be a really good secondary. You pair those two as well with AJ Terrell, one of the best cover corners in the league at cornerback. Now, the other corner position is a little weak, and I'm not going to say that this is going to make them a top defense, but if the safety duo back there can, be a little opportunistic, which they're known to do, if the pass rush can get home a few times, which Matthew Judon is known to do, this defense could potentially rank top 10 in the league. And that has less to do with the talent level on this defense and more to do with the strength of schedule. The Falcons have the easiest schedule in the league this season, so that should absolutely help them. As well as the offense, we already know what happened there. They bring in Kirk Cousins to pair with the elite weapons they already have at all three skill position levels. This is a Falcons team that I think just added a couple wins to their book, and we'll go over what we had before. I actually have to go ahead and update that because I had them at 8-9, which after these moves, I definitely think I need to change this around at least a little bit. So we'll change some of that later, and we'll do a whole rewind before the season begins, as we still got a couple more days to go. But this Falcons team is a team that I believe, with these additions on defense and the combination of a weak NFC, has catapulted themselves into the top of that conference conversation. I think this is a team that absolutely we could slap NFC title game labels on. No doubt about that in my mind. The question is, does this move them up to Super Bowl contenders? And that's where I think you're pushing it a little bit. If they get a couple breaks to go the right way, if the 49ers or the Lions or even the Packers, who are, I think, the three teams above them in the NFC, maybe you can put the Eagles up there, but they're definitely top 5 in the NFC, maybe even top 3 at this point. There is a real shot that they make the Super Bowl this season. First time since 2017. Obviously, we all remember what happened then, 28-3 against the Patriots, but this is a team that I think really they're in win now mode, and I think they did a really good job of going and getting guys for that win now mode. They knew what their weaknesses were, and that's why the Michael Penix Jr. pick was kind of criticized, not only because they signed Kirk Cousins and then they drafted a quarterback, but because they had huge other needs, specifically at pass rush. Going out and getting Matthew Judon, going out and getting Justin Simmons, especially this late into the offseason, getting those quality pass rushers and defenders is huge. It's huge for them. This absolutely puts them ahead, and I think it absolutely catapults them, if they weren't already at the top of the NFC South, to all but guaranteed a spot on top of that division and a playoff spot. So I think this was a huge move for the Falcons, and I love it. Now, getting to the Patriots side of things, I understand he was disgruntled, and that's why the return wasn't as good, going back to Matthew Judon here. It still feels like it wasn't enough. And I know he's coming off of an injury-riddled season, but you take a guy who has had 10+ sacks in each of his last 2 healthy seasons. He's still only 32, so he's still got a few years left on him. It's not going to be a 10-year career, but he's still got a lot left on him. He hasn't really shown any signs of decline. Letting him go for just a 3rd-round pick feels like not enough. I know they weren't going to get a 1st for him or anything, but maybe getting a 3rd and like a 6th, maybe a 3rd and a 7th for a guy like him, just throwing something else in that package as well. It feels like a little bit of an underpay for Matthew Judon. Now, again, his age is a factor here. He is 32. He was not happy with the Patriots. He wanted out, or he wanted a contract, and they weren't going to give him that contract, so they let him go out. It still is one of those things that just feels like they should have gotten more for a guy like Matthew Judon. And props to the Falcons organization for going out and getting a guy like this, going and filling their biggest need. on a team that, you know, is built to succeed right now. How far they'll be able to go, that's going to be up to injury luck and the coaching staff that has just moved in there. But that is a huge move for them, and I love that move for the Falcons. For the Patriots, it doesn't matter that much because they're not really competing for anything yet. But they'll get a higher draft pick. They'll be able to replace him soon with one of these college players coming out of the draft. But we'll see what happens. Let me know what you think of this trade. If it makes the Falcons contenders or not. I'm in the camp where I think it actually might. But we'll see what happens there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the history that was made on the diamond last night. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Falcons revamping their defense, bringing in star pass rusher Matthew Judon in a trade with the New England Patriots, as well as perennial Pro Bowl candidate star safety Justin Simmons, who was a free agent, signing him to a 1-year, $8 million deal. Huge get for the Falcons team that needed to shore up a couple of different spots on defense. In this segment, we're going to move on to the world of baseball in the MLB as history was made last night. Aaron Judge continues to wow the world with his power, his ability to hit home runs, and he has just become the fastest player in MLB history to hit 300 home runs. So we will talk about what that means for him, what kind of trajectory and what kind of company he is in, as well as where he ranks all time as far as power hitter goes. So stick around for that. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat button right next to the chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are getting into history on the diamond today as Aaron Judge hits his 300th home run, an absolute mammoth of a shot, as you would expect from a guy who is on pace to hit another 58 home runs this season. He is the fastest player in MLB history to reach the 300 career home run mark. It is insane what he has been able to do. He hit 300 home runs in 955 games. That's the fastest. For context, he did it in over He did over 100 games faster than the previous leader, Ralph Kiner, who did it in 1,087 games. He's the only one to ever do it in under 1,000 games. That is so impressive. Not only that, but he did it in the fewest number of at-bats, 3,431 at-bats, beating out Babe Ruth's record. That's a crazy record to beat out. Babe Ruth played 100 years ago. He beat it out by more than 400 at-bats. Babe Ruth, it took him 3,830 at-bats to hit that 300 home run mark. Over just almost exactly 400 at-bats quicker than it took the Babe to hit 300. That's the kind of power numbers we're talking about with Aaron Judge. He's on pace for those 58 home runs this season. Most likely, maybe, actually, this is going to be a crazy AL MVP race between him and Bobby Witt Jr., but he most likely is going to win his second MVP award in the last couple of seasons. He only didn't win one last year because of injuries. He hit 62 home runs back in 2022, wins his first AL MVP. He is most likely going to get his second straight healthy season. This season, offensively, is insane for him and Bobby Witt right now. If you just go by power numbers, right? We haven't seen this kind of power since Barry Bonds, right? And you could make the argument that outside of Barry Bonds, Aaron Judge is the best power hitter in the history of baseball. Now, I know the history of baseball goes back. Obviously, Babe Ruth is there. Obviously, you have Hank Aaron in there as well. Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, these guys that had crazy home run numbers. But when we look at what Aaron Judge has been able to do consistently in this era of baseball, leading the league in home runs over and over, he averages 51 home runs a season. Averages over 50 home runs a season. That is insane. He's only 32 right now, and he came up to the league late. Like, he came up to the league, I believe, when he was 26. And he's already done these kind of things that you expect out of a guy that would have come up as a young prospect at the age of a Juan Soto, a teammate of his. He's doing these things incredibly quickly. It is insane. Also, the injury history that he has, it is crazy how he can connect with a baseball. It's almost unrivaled in the history of the sport. And he is on pace to win his second MVP, right? This is a guy in Aaron Judge that is arguably the best hitter in baseball. Now, he's right next to a guy in Juan Soto that could just as easily have that title, But what Aaron Judge is able to do, the fear that he's able to put in pitchers' hearts, people get asked this question all the time. Pitchers get asked the question, who is the last batter you would want to face, at any point in your career, in this point in the season, right? And when I hear that question asked, I've heard a variety of different answers, right? But the one that I have heard the most from these interviews, from these questions, is Aaron Judge. Just because, what are you supposed to do against him? He is the power hitter of this generation, right? You have the other guy that it could be in Giancarlo Stanton, who is the active leader in home runs with 422, but he's been playing forever. He's been playing for almost twice as long as Aaron Judge has. Now, injuries, again, a big part of that. He is going to surpass him. Aaron Judge is going to be the power hitter of this generation. And the question is, where does he rank now in the history of power hitters, right? And I would argue you could put him all the way up as high as 2. And I think it would be a travesty to put him down below 5, honestly. He's definitely a top 5 power hitter all time. Now, you could make the argument for a lot of different reasons why he shouldn't be number 2, why he should be lower than a couple of these other guys that I mentioned earlier on in the segment. But he's just getting started. You have to remember that. He's still only 32. He's probably got a good 4, 5, maybe even 6 years left with the way he's playing. He can just transition over to DH and just focus on hitting in his older years, and he doesn't seem like he is a guy that's going to run out of steam anytime soon. It kind of is insane. Now, getting back to the MVP conversation with him, I think this might put him over the top, not just the milestone that he has this season, but the fact that he, in back to back healthy seasons now, is pushing to break the home run record in the AL. Now, obviously, we saw him do it back in 2022 when he hit those 62 home runs, passing the record of 61 before cooling down a little bit down the stretch. Hurt in 2023. Now, back in 2024, he's healthy once again, and he's on pace for 58. And the difference between 58 and 63 in baseball is not that much. We've seen guys like Albert Pujols go ahead and crush their home run mark when he was chasing that 700 career home run mark. He went on a power surge, and then he went and passed that number when he wasn't supposed to get anywhere close to it. This is a real chase again, and it's kind of been hidden a little bit by some other storylines this MLB season with, the race for just the AL East between the Yankees and the Orioles, or the race on the MVP between teammates on the Yankees and Bobby Witt Jr. on the Royals. I mean, that is going to be an insane race right there. This MLB season is wrapping up right around the corner. We'll go over, we'll do a whole run around the MLB tomorrow when we do our MLB. Tomorrow when we do our MLB power rankings. But congratulations to Aaron Judge for hitting 300. His next victim on the list to pass is his teammate Anthony Rizzo, just 3 home runs ahead of him. That should be done but by the time that September rolls around, I believe. So I'm excited to see how high he can climb on this list, and these guys are the limit for him. Curious to see if he can break the AL home run record again, and maybe he can chase that single season home run record. We will see what happens there. It's not going to happen this season, but the pace he's on, maybe he does it next year, because 60 home runs in consecutive seasons, not consecutive, but consecutive healthy seasons, I'll say, is an insane stat line. That's not something a normal person can do. 60 home runs is insane. But let me know what you think. Again, fastest player to ever hit 300 home runs, over 100 games faster, 399 at-bats faster than anybody else. It is crazy what he has been able to do from a power standpoint at the plate. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to do a little detour into the world of soccer. The U.S. men's national team has hired a new manager. We talked a little bit about their old manager, how they needed to fire him. They finally did, and they've hired a new one. We'll talk about that and much more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows absolutely free. College football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours, just like on your favorite cable sports channel. Except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about Aaron Judge hitting a milestone in the MLB, the fastest player in MLB history, not just by games, but by at-bats, to hit the 300 career home run milestone, beat the previous record by over 100 games, by just about 400 at-bats, breaking a Babe Ruth record that has stood for almost 100 years. insane. We also covered the revamped Falcons defense as they signed both Justin Simmons and trade for Matthew Judon. Those two will be huge pieces for them as they look to contend this season in the NFC. In this segment, though, we're going to take a quick little detour into the world of soccer as the U.S. men's national team has officially hired a new manager to take over for Greg Buholzer, who failed miserably. I'm not going to sugarcoat this at the Copa America, failing to make it past the group stage, the first time that a host country has ever not made it past the group stage. So we'll talk about who the new manager is, what this means for the future of men's soccer in the United States, and much more. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you should hit that super chat button right next to the chat option. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, throw that in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to take a little deep dive into the world of soccer as the U.S. men's national team has hired a new manager, taking over for Greg Berhalter after a failure, couple failures in a row. He was technically fired after the World Cup. They let his contract run out, but they rehired him, bringing him on for the Copa America. He is officially fired now. Now they hire Mauricio Pochettino to be the new U.S. men's national team coach. He's going to lead the team as they host, or co-host, I should say, the 2026 World Cup, coming to the entirety of North America, Canada, U.S., and Mexico. They will host the U.S. men's national team. He left Chelsea this summer. He's had a very decorated career over there in the Premier League, as well as coaching around a bunch of other highly successful teams, Tottenham and PSG in France. Again, we don't have the numbers for this yet, but this was one of these things that is huge for the standings of American soccer around the world, right? Because this guy was in conversations to be the new coach for the British, for the English soccer team over there, who let their manager go after not winning the Euros, coming in second place for the second year in a row. And the U.S. comes in and reportedly sweeps him off the feet, sweeps him away from England. That is a huge get, and it shows the growing respect for the U.S. in the international world of soccer, which is really, really important to see. As obviously more and more of our players are making it overseas, our team is, you can see, measurably getting better. Obviously, the last major tournament, the Copa America, is not a good example of that, but this is huge for them. Obviously, the first choice club, we weren't able to steal from Liverpool, but getting Pochettino is absolutely something that should be a huge momentum shift for the U.S. men's national team. Now, I do understand, this isn't the biggest news for a lot of people in America, but as soccer continues to grow, it's important to have a good coach, and we saw that a lot with Berhalter under the realm. Now, a lot of the players liked playing for him, which is why they ended up rehiring him, but he was never able to, get the right strategy going for the players he had. He was never able to rally the troops when he needed to get them together. So he needed to get fired, especially after the embarrassment that took place when we hosted the Copa America. So he is gone now. We have a new coach in the U.S. national team, and he's got 2 years to get this team in shape. get them ready for the 2026 World Cup. We can't host and not get out of the group stage. That's unacceptable at this point. But anyway, let me know what you think of this hire. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to move back into the world of the NFL. We're going to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, the two-time reigning Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. We'll talk about where we have them as far as their offseason goes, give them a grade, and then we'll go over their schedule and give them a record prediction. See if they can three-peat for the first time in the history of the Super Bowl era. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the new hire for the U.S. men's national team. A huge get, stealing this coach from the clutches of the English. Something that I honestly never thought I would see in the world of soccer. But it's very exciting news. We also finished talking about the Falcons revamping their defense, going out and getting new star pass rusher Matthew Judon in a trade with the Patriots, as well as signing star safety, Pro Bowl safety Justin Simmons from free agency, formerly of the Denver Broncos. In this segment here, we're gonna stick in the NFL, finish off our show in these last two segments talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to talk about their offseason, give them a grade for what really was a crazy offseason for the Super Bowl champs, filled with distractions. So we'll cover a little bit of that as well. Then we'll take a break and talk about their record prediction. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you have to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, there should be a super chat option. You can use that. If you do either of those two, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw that in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, we're going to continue off our show here talking about the offseason for the Kansas City Chiefs. And what better place to start than they won the Super Bowl. Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning the second straight Super Bowl. They are on a rampage, looking to be the first team in the Super Bowl era to win 3 straight championships. The first team ever to win 3 straight Super Bowls is what they are looking to do. And they're inspired. Everything I've read says, hey, we're looking to make history here. Obviously, that's what they're going to say because they want to win another Super Bowl. But this is a moment for them. And you could make the argument that the team got better. Obviously, the biggest weakness for this team last season was their wide receiver core, relying on for whatever reason, Kadarius Toney, who somehow lost the ability to catch the ball, rookie Rashee Rice, as well as, a bunch of other crazy casts of characters to fill out that wide receiver room. Travis Kelce, still there. He did have his worst season of in recent memory, but he was able to turn that around in the playoffs and do his thing. So I'm not too concerned about him falling off a cliff, really. It was also Patrick Mahomes' worst season last year, which, was still a pretty good season for any other quarterback, but it was pretty much by far his worst season. I expect them to make a big turnaround, and all of that starts with the wide receiver core. They went out and they addressed that position. First of all, in the draft, trading up with the Buffalo Bills to draft Xavier Worthy, pick 28 overall. The speedy wide receiver out of Texas is supposed to add another layer to that offense. He's going to be a huge part of what they want to do. And we've seen it already in training camp, what he's been able to do as far as spreading the field. I mean, we've seen how successful they are with a speedy guy on the outside. Think Tyreek Hill, obviously. They also brought in Hollywood Brown, who unfortunately went down with an injury, a fancy shoulder injury, which basically translates to a dislocated shoulder. He'll be out 6 weeks, so he'll miss a little bit of the season, as well as Rashee Rice going down with injury. He should be back soon, but the wide receiver core is dealing with its fair share of injuries right now. Rashee Rice also probably going to get suspended for the whole situation of what he did down in Dallas as far as running after getting caught going 126 miles an hour. Insane there. Not something you should be doing. The Chiefs had a lot of fun stories over the offseason, and we're not going to get too deep into a lot of them, but they had their fair share of off the field issues as far as the Chief goes. Now, getting back to on the field here, right? What they did outside of the draft, they went and they kept as many important pieces as they could. The most important thing was re-signing Chris Jones, who is a game changer, one of the best defensive tackles in the league. With the retirement of Aaron Donald, probably is the best defensive tackle in the league, getting 5 years, $158.5 million, as well as fixing up the offensive line in the draft. There weren't huge strides made, but getting a starting left tackle in the second round is huge for them, going along with what is a really solid piece of offense. There isn't a lot of places where they can really improve offensively. Defensively, I think they definitely took a step back. One of the biggest losses is L'Jarius Sneed, who played a huge part in their Super Bowl winning defense, which was elite throughout most of the season. He's going to get replaced by Shamari Connor, which is what it looks like, or Joshua Williams on the depth chart so far. That is a big loss. They still have Trent McDuffie, a guy that I really like coming out of college. He's done his thing, but the corner core, the secondary, is definitely a little bit worse than it was last year. But along the line, obviously you have Chris Jones. They brought back Mike Dana, George Karlaftis was a promising rookie last season, as well as the linebackers. They did lose Willie Gay to the Saints, who I think he's going to be really good, but they still have Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquil, as well as Leo Chenal. But Bolton and Tranquil should put together a pretty solid linebacking core. This defense is going to be good. Their defense definitely did take a step back from where it was last year, but that is to be expected from a team that needs to find places to pay their guys, and they had to let a couple of them go. So the defense had its chance. They were a huge part of their Super Bowl run last year. Looking to three-peat here, the defense got worse. The offense got better, only marginally, though. I love the wide receivers that they brought in. Wasn't too expensive, but with Patrick Mahomes, as he proved last season, it helps to have receivers, but you don't need them. And I would have more prioritized on the defensive end if I were the Chiefs. But I do understand with what they were doing. As far as the draft goes, picking late in the draft never makes it easy. But I thought all things said, they got 2 starters out of the draft. And if you can get 2 starters picking late in the first round and the second round and so on, that is a good draft for me. I think they did a good job with the draft. Overall, if they hadn't lost a little bit on defense, there wouldn't be too much to complain about. But they did lose a little bit defensively, so I'm going to give them a solid B on their offseason. They went and they fixed their most glaring weakness, which was wide receiver, but they also let a position of strength get much weaker with the loss of L'Jarius Sneed. So we'll see what happens this offseason. I think they'll be just fine. The Chiefs are, believe it or not, very, very good at football. Their over-under is set at 11.5 right now as far as Vegas odds go. We're going to see in our next segment when we come back after this short break whether or not I have them going over or under that win total, and if they might repeat as Super Bowl champions for the third time in a row. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the Kansas City Chiefs offseason. Lots of ups and downs, plenty of off-the-field turmoil that we didn't get into, but that was the storyline of it. Outside of the off-the-field stuff, it was a pretty solid offseason for them, bringing in some solid wide receivers, as well as signing Chris Jones to a massive contract, something that they desperately needed to take care of if they wanted any kind of success to continue. In this segment here, we're going to go game by game, give them a breakdown of all 17 games, all 18 weeks for the Kansas City Chiefs, see if they have a shot at repeating for the third straight year, the first time in NFL history that a team has won 3 straight Super Bowls, possibly is on the line for them. We'll see what kind of record they have in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the Kansas City Chiefs schedule prediction here. The line that Vegas has set for them right now is 11.5. But they play a relatively easy schedule. Now they do have to take on the AFC North, consisting of the Bengals, Browns, Ravens, and Steelers. So that's not necessarily the easiest. But outside of that, they also get the NFC South, which we just talked about the Falcons being a much improved team. But other than that, it is very much a weaker division. So this is not the hardest schedule in football. It's not the easiest. They do have an early bye sitting at week 6 on the season, which may hurt for down the stretch when you're trying to win a couple games, but their division is not that hard themselves. Outside of them, maybe the biggest threat is the Chargers, the Raiders. I'm not sure. I don't think it's the Broncos, but all three of those teams that are left in the Chiefs division don't really scream threat to me. So this isn't going to be too tough of a schedule when we're talking about in the grand scheme of things for NFL teams for the Kansas City Chiefs. But they do start off tough. In their first 5 games before a bye, they have to take on the Ravens and the Bengals, as well as the Falcons. 3 of those 5 games against teams that I have projected in the playoffs this season. We are going to start off in Week 1, taking a look at the Chiefs taking on the Ravens. That is the season opener on Thursday Night Football. That is the first game of the season. They take on the Ravens at home, but I think the Ravens, led by two-time MVP Lamar Jackson, take this game from the Chiefs. It is going to be tough. It is in Kansas City, but I'm going to give this one to the Ravens here. In Week 2 against Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Joe Burrow, one of the only quarterbacks in the league to seemingly have the Chiefs' number. I'm taking the Bengals on this one, even though they do constantly start slow. But I'm taking the Bengals to win this game. The Chiefs start 0-2. Not a very good double title defense run to start. But those are 2 of their hardest games all season. You're not going to get a much harder start to the season than that, those first 2 games. But the Chiefs do lose both of them. Heading into Week 3, taking on the much improved Falcons on the road, I think this is where they get their first win. The Chiefs take care of business in Atlanta. Again, they did improve a lot, but I think this Chiefs team is just straight up better than the Falcons. The Chiefs improve to 1-2 on the year. Then they get their first division game on the road in LA against the LA Chargers. They win this game pretty easily. I just don't think this is the Chargers' year, and we'll talk about them probably tomorrow. But the Chiefs improve to 2-2 on the season before Week 5 taking on the New Orleans Saints. The Saints come into this game struggling a little bit based on my projections, but I think the Chiefs win this game pretty easily as well. Derek Carr isn't really a big threat. They improve to 3-2. So after starting off a little slow, they hit their bye at 3-2, and they need this bye week because up next is a Super Bowl rematch taking on the 49ers in Santa Clara. I do think the 49ers, with revenge on their minds and in their hearts, take care of business in this one. They fall to 3-3 on the young season through 7 weeks. We've almost reached the midway point, and they're just a middling team. But now this is where I have them getting going. In their next stretch of games, they only play one playoff team from last season. In fact, for the rest of the season, they only have 4 games against playoff teams from last year. This is where the season gets. This is where it gets a little easier for them. Taking on the Raiders to start off this stretch, they win this game on the road. Again, not that tough for them to take care of division, as we've seen Patrick Mahomes dominate this division, barely losing any games against any of them his entire career. So they improve to 4-3 on the year. Then they take on the Buccaneers, and this one I think could get interesting, but I am going to give this one to the Chiefs as they improve to 5-3. Then they get the Broncos, and while Bo Nix did look really good in his preseason debut, I'm not convinced. I'm giving a win to the Chiefs here at home. They improve to 6-3 on the year. Then an old rivalry. Josh Allen and the Bills host them up in Buffalo. Should be a really good game. Generally, the Bills win these regular season matchups. I'm taking the Bills to lose, though. I think the Chiefs are gonna take advantage of their weakened safety duo, secondary especially, and I think the Bills lose this game at home. But The Chiefs improve to 7-7 on the year. Then they take on the Panthers, and I don't think I need to say too much about this one. It is on the road, but the Chiefs win this game. They improve to 8-3. Then 2 straight division games, hosting at home against the Raiders and the Chargers. I'm giving them both of those as well. They improve now to a ridiculous. After being 500 at 3-3, they go on a 7-game win streak mid-season, and that all but guarantees them a playoff spot. They improve to 10-3 on the year. Then they get a little bit of a tougher roadblock. They play 3 straight playoff teams from last season in the Browns, the Texans, and the Steelers before getting the Broncos to close out their season. I have them losing to the Browns here. I think that defense and the Browns are going to surprise a couple of people a couple of times this year. I'm giving this one to the Browns against the Chiefs. The Texans beat the Chiefs, though, the next week. Or the Texans, they take care of business against the Texans, in the next week. So they drop 1, gain 1 against 2 quality opponents. They improve their record on this season to 11-4. 2 games to go down the stretch here. They host the 2 games on the road here. They just finished their home game against the Texans. Then they have the Steelers and the Broncos. And I think the Steelers game is going to be deceptively tough, but I do think the Chiefs are going to win this one. They improve to 12-4. And then the Broncos, this one is going to be, if they win, they'll probably have the 1 seed, so they're going to play their starters here. The Broncos aren't enough for the Chiefs, and the Chiefs win, finishing off their year at 13-4. 13-4 is probably the ceiling for this Chiefs team. This is a very, very good Chiefs team, don't get me wrong, but 13-4 is not easy for anyone to do. This puts them at the 1 seed for the AFC, and are they going to get are they going to get another Super Bowl? We'll have to see. We're going to do AFC playoff predictions as we get closer to the season. But for now, 13-4, atop of their division, get the 1 seed in the AFC, get that bye. It's scary. They might get it done here. But that's what I have. Let me know if you agree or disagree with anything I've had to say here. The Chiefs off season going 13-4. Let me know where you have the Chiefs doing this season. But anyway, thank you everybody so much for tuning into today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you have any kind of questions that you'd like me to cover, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I'll get to it on tomorrow's show. But I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. We'll be back here same time, same place tomorrow, going over all of the biggest news in the sports world, as well as our MLB power rankings. So I'll see you tomorrow for that. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.